All right, I think I'm going to start streaming it in like 30 seconds. And I don't know. Why is this not showing up? All right, we are pretty much live here. Plus, I'm gonna... Once again, your video got messed up after I changed something, so I'm gonna just fix your video again, but...
I could turn it off too, let me know.
Yeah, let me turn it off. But we are online. Welcome, everybody. This is Brian Koo with another ROK live stream. I'm here with the Busdriver. Bus, how's it going?
Good, man. The 3092 PR tour for me, I guess. You and Plato reached out within like an hour of each other. This is not planned, but it's fine.
It's funny you say that right off the bat, because one of the things that I thought about as I was thinking about this podcast we're doing is that ultimately you and I are competing for the exact same talent. And we are, we're both trying to essentially convince people that our kingdoms are a good place to go to. And that's, for me, that's part of the reason that I make content, but certainly not all of it. And I'm sure that the same is true for you. I'm just trying to get Busdriver up on the stream. Welcome, everybody, to this live stream.
Yeah, the other part with that, too, I want to say there's... What's the word I want to use? There's like a feel. I was going to say style, but I'll use feel for every kingdom that, like, especially if you have someone doing like YouTube, where you could kind of capture what the vibe of that kingdom feels like. It resonates with like different people, right? So I think, yes, we are competing for the same talent, but also there's some people that just naturally gravitate towards different kingdoms just because of the vibe they get from that YouTube. So it's like in real life, I own a CrossFit gym, right? And there's literally a gym maybe 300 meters from where I'm at that opened up 2-3 years ago. I can't even tell. Like, I felt no difference as far as the business. There's another one that we opened next to about 10 years ago. Like, they're about a mile away. So it's really, really close. And like, theoretically, you're all competing for the same people. But for example, we're right next to a college called Rollins. Like, they appeal, because they're right on the street. They appeal to that group. Like, we have our own demographic that we appeal to. The new one has their own thing. So I think it all works out. Yes, there's some competition, but also people have their niche. So
Yep, definitely.
yeah.
And well, we briefly had this thing working, and now your webcam, maybe it's working, maybe it's not. Oh yeah, we're good. We're good. We're live. Thank you all for being here. Sorry it took a few minutes.
All right.
People are hanging out in the chat, and now I lost your video again. Oh gosh, dang it.
Wait, so this is live or
We
just
are
a
live.
just a voice, but just a voice?
Well, I'm on the screen now. You were on the screen, and then your Discord just completely
Because
disappeared.
I have your stream open. It's still on the thumbnail. Let me see what's going on.
Well, anyway, let's get
Here we
started.
go.
I'll keep playing around with Busdriver's video as we go along here.
We got a face reveal. Damn. Okay.
Yep. What's up? What's
First
up,
time ever?
everybody? I'm really not good
Yeah.
at looking into the camera yet, especially because I'm
Yeah.
messing with all this technical stuff. But listen, Busdriver and I are here today to talk about kingdom building. And, you know, there are many players in this game who have built kingdoms in the past. They are in the process of building kingdoms now, or they are thinking about building kingdoms in the future. And I did feel like Busdriver and I were both very well positioned to talk about this topic. And as a way of introducing everybody to both of us, Bus, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? We're both content creators in Rise of Kingdoms, but tell us a little bit about yourself and why you have expertise in talking about kingdom building.
Well, I don't have expertise. My involvement with Kingdom has like come in stages, and it's all very recent, right? So I've been playing the game since July of 22, so a little over 2 years and 3 months now. I've never put a marker down in my life until like May or June of this year, and I've never been an R4. I own a business in real life, and you know, like I think you talked about like you were starting a business, right? Or I don't know if you're still doing that now. But one of the
Still dealing with the ups and downs of that for sure.
Yeah, right. And like once you're in that position, even for a little bit, like one thing you almost dream is like it would be so awesome if someone else was responsible and they could just tell you what to do. And you're like, this is what I need you to do. Get it done by this time. And that's your task that you're responsible for. You finish it. And so for the most of the time I was playing this game, that like I didn't want any responsibility besides just my own account. But I always thought if I did get involved with that, like at most, I want to be like a grunt that just gets told what to do, right? Because it's like I don't, that would be awesome, right? And then I did know that I want to get involved with migration. We talked about this a little bit, right? Like to me, it's crazy to have a YouTube channel and then not use it to help your kingdom, right? Because it's a win-win on so many different levels. One, you get to improve like your gameplay experience, right? You could actually help attract the people that you want to attract to make the kingdom better, which would make your experience better. But also like it's like this like built-in advantage that you have that like a lot of content creators aren't actively doing it, or maybe not doing it as much as I feel like they could, especially with channels that are bigger than mine. It's crazy to me. So I always knew I wanted to get involved with migration. So I started my channel was it 10 months ago? That's it. Yeah, about 10 months ago, right? And I ended up getting involved with migration in June, and then from there, this new kingdom and you know, my dreams of just being a grunt that gets told what to do kind of floated away. So I don't actually do that much work. There's like a group of us that are for lack of a better word, like making decisions, or like trying to organize like who does what. But honestly, so many people in the kingdom have helped out, right? So we have about 50 people. We kind of joke around, but about half the people are actually in the officer chat, and people are just really stepping up. They're saying, "Hey, I'm good with stats, or I'm good with data. I'm good with like this, or like I would like to help out. Just let me know what I can help with." And then as people step up, right, like you just kind of figure out, okay, these people are naturally just excited, or I don't know if excited is the right word, but it comes easier to them. And then so people have kind of like just stepped up into different roles, and it's like a very cool project for us. We're working together, so that's kind of my experience from essentially not doing anything to how I ended up in this new kingdom, as part of like the leadership group.
Yeah. And to introduce everybody to myself as well, and where I'm coming at on this topic, I've been helping to build a kingdom and an alliance for just about 6 years now. I was actually thinking about it earlier. I think I started in maybe October of 2018, maybe November. Let me check really quick. This might be my 6 year anniversary in this game. Let's see when Markswoman was spawned. I think this is November. Yeah. So I'm very close to being on a
One of
6 year
the
anniversary of working with the very same group. We've been building the Handsome Devils for about 6 years now. We've gone to a couple different kingdoms, but I'm both on I'm on the other side of what Busdriver's doing, where I'm sort of near the end of kingdom building, but also in the exact same boat as him, where we are, we're trying to recruit the same kind of players, and we both have the same goal. We have the same goal of trying to build an end game kingdom in ROK that can actually have success, that can last for a long time. And so I just thought this was, us having a podcast series about this would be a great chance to bounce ideas off each other, share both similar experiences and differences that we have as far as these things go. And I can talk about the journey I've gone through. Bus can talk about the journey that he's going through right now. And hopefully that can be helpful to a lot of people out there who are, thinking about building a kingdom in this game as well. Because, like Busdriver was kind of getting into as he talked about, oh, he's already got a business. Part of him is like the last thing he wants to do is build another business in Rise of Kingdoms. But it is both a daunting thing, but also a rewarding thing, and also something that like essentially has to be done, right? Like if you want to play, with a good group in this game, a lot of times you have to build it, because a lot of times groups just completely fall apart. And so that's what we're going to be talking about in this podcast. And just to keep it a little bit formal, and also, Bus, one of the things I'm thinking about is like, you and I are coming from like a very specific perspective of like being like these end game players who are trying to build like competitive like A or Imperium kingdoms. But there's also a lot of people who are like much earlier in the process, and they probably
Yeah.
think about kingdom building in like a different way. Like it means something different to them. They're like trying to recruit hundreds of players to start a kingdom that's going to have
Yeah.
multiple alliances. And so, just as a question to kind of hopefully widen this conversation to more people, tell me about your guys' decision to. I think this is public knowledge. You guys bought 3092. You found a kingdom that you could buy and migrate to. Talk to me about that decision versus some of the other
So
options you had, as far as
so I
like.
can
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so how we acquired it, I can't talk about.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's like
Well, let me just say quickly,
yeah,
like there are other options, right? You could have merged with a
yeah,
group. You could have merged with
yeah,
another group. You could have rebuilt the kingdom that you were in before 2268 and like kicked out the dead weight and just worked with what you had there, which is what a lot of kingdoms do as they constantly refresh. Or you guys could have started brand new accounts in brand new kingdoms, took control of that kingdom early on, and then migrated there at some point. I'm not totally familiar with like the current migration rules of like how many players can migrate back to a kingdom in KVK2. But talk to me
yeah.
about your decision to get a kingdom the way you did instead of doing all those other things.
Okay, so you mentioned the early game and the late game, right? And the what's conducive to being successful in the early game actually messes up your kingdom in the late game, in my opinion, right? So power is a lot more important, right? So like how much power a kingdom has is essentially how you. It's like it's how you measure how strong a kingdom is, right? How many 100 mil players do you have? What's your alliance power, all that stuff. Whereas as you switch to the late game, right, it's your power relative to your KP, and if anything, the KP is valued a lot more. And if you can keep your KP, if you have good KP with the lower the power relative to your KP, the leaner, quote unquote, your kingdom is, the more likely you'll get a good matchmaking, right? So that's why it's very, very common. You see these like top imps in the early game, right? Like for the early game imps, they get to KVK 5 or 6 and they fall apart because the way they're constructed was conducive to them being successful in the early game. But then once they actually get to end game, right, they're matching up with someone with 4 or 5x the KP they have, but the same power, and they just can't hang. So that's very common. And I don't know what the solution is for that, but I think at 1.68, 2268, which is where we migrated from, had like 5 or 6 alliances, right? And the game is very different now than it was a few years ago, at least from what I'm told, like 4 years ago, right? Where like a 2-3 alliance kingdom was the norm, not like the exception. We're only in the very early game now. So when you have that many alliances, and then you need to downsize, people either go rogue, they just kind of, you have a lot of farm, like it just, you start accumulating a lot of dead weight. So like the definition of a dead weight is essentially someone, because if you're a T5 player, right, you have at least like 52, 53 mil power, and then above, depending on what you do with your tech, you could zero someone over and over, they're not going to drop below that. All right. So when you just have X amount of dead weight, quote unquote, dead weight players, basically someone that's like 55 mil power or above, but then they're not actually contributing in KVK, like fighting, right? You're matching up against someone else. Let's just say Lilith, however they actually do it, we don't know for sure, is looking at like 150 people on one side versus another. If you have a dead weight, basically that player is occupying that power slot, but they're not able to contribute, all right, primarily through fighting, compared to a normal player that's expected with that power. There's no way to get rid of them. So if you're going into a KVK with X amount of dead weights, it puts you at a matchmaking disadvantage. So when we decided to move to a new kingdom, it was one of the primary reasons was because in 68, we were estimating we had probably about 1.5 to 2 bill of dead weight, which is a lot. Not the most. There's kingdoms with way more.
We might have more than that.
Yeah. Honestly, and it's and like there's no way to get out of it, right? Because there's these people like you could zero them, right? They'll put on, they literally just spend their gens or whatever they do on like a 30-day shield. They just renew that 12 times a year. I don't know why they keep logging in to farm, and then like sometimes they'll like get the inspiration to steal MG or something, right? But being able to essentially kind of know what you're doing now, being able to adapt to the current landscape, which is you don't have to go that many alliances, and then start with a much cleaner kingdom there. Long term, will probably benefit you a lot more, right? So like it's kind of like, let's just say you have a job, right? You get to a certain point, career progression, you can't get much higher, and you're like, okay, I'm going to take 2 years off to go back to school, right? Like technically, short term, you're setting yourself back for the potential to set yourself up for success long term a lot better. So I would say that's probably the primary motivation for that. And also, when you're on a losing streak, you're more willing to take chances, to try different things to see what works out, right? I wouldn't necessarily say the losing streak was because we had dead weights that we needed to clear, but that's part of the, I guess that's part of the freedom you have when you don't have too much more to lose, right? You start figuring out, okay, what are ways where we could go about it to maybe like get some advantage, right? There's like a book that, like, I don't know if they still make you read it now, but like any business degree student have read a book called like Good to Great. And like, one of the quotes in there is that the enemy of the great is the good, right? So like they love to use the Blockbuster example. They have plenty of opportunities.
There's a counter quote to that though.
Yeah, what is it?
It's like, isn't perfect is the enemy of good? Perfect is the enemy of the good? Where it's like some people get frozen by trying to do something perfectly.
I agree. And, yeah, actually, one of my mentors. Yeah. I don't know if that's a counter to that, but actually, one of my mentors is his quote he likes to use is that being a perfectionist is actually for cowards, because it's actually an excuse not to be responsible, to go outside your comfort zone, right? So but greatness isn't perfection. Greatness is like taking a shot at something much bigger, right? And like I think like talking to me in private and the stuff I would say in public, I know it's pretty outrageous. Like I know the stuff I say is like outrageous. Not saying it for shock value. It's just like that's what has me excited, right? Like it's I don't need things to be going amazing, but as long as I have hope and I can see how or make a connection how whatever I'm doing now could be a path to lead towards that greatness, I'm very, very motivated. Right. Whereas like when the hope is cut off and you're just doing stuff to try to get to the next day without that hope, a big vision for the future, it starts becoming like a grind, you know, like it just like it starts wearing me out. So uh dead weight, clearing dead weight, setting the kingdom up for something much bigger in the future. I would say like that's like the main reason why we went to the 3092. Or else we could have just stayed in 2268 and tried to rebuild it there. Right. It would have been a lot less work. But I would say that's why.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting way to frame it as far as, you know, you were going for the better longer term situation with 3092 rather than reconfiguring 2268. Yeah, and like I said, you know, we have different perspectives on this, and we've just had different experiences in this game. You know, one of the things I'll say as like a counterpoint to that, and this, it's not to disagree with you, it's just to like let
Yeah.
people see the big picture of like what this game is about and what's happening in this game. You know, there are merits to having that older kingdom. And you know, I watch a lot of your content, and so this was something you've talked about along the way, and I've sort of been formulating some of these ideas in my head as I listen to your content. Like, you know, we've been in 1770 for a long time now, and there are
Yeah.
some nice things about being in an older kingdom that you've been in a long time. For one thing,
Yeah.
it's there are some accounts that, you know, have active players that can be used as like farm filling
Yeah.
cities in KVK, right? And I think you see 1093 do this as well. I think that 1093, when they fought against 1960, you saw some accounts that didn't have amazing KP that were parked right next to a fort or an outpost, and
Yeah.
they were filling with those accounts. And you know, some of those accounts also, and some of those active players, they also have like a lot of resources, right? And so, like in
Yeah.
1770, in recent years, one of the things we've been able to do is we've been able to talk with some of these less active players and be like, look, this is what you can do to help us. You can share your resources with a lot of people. You know, we almost,
Yeah.
I talk about it as like alternate banks. We have like more than one bank because some of our players are just banks, and they can also, you know, fill fill forts and fill flags during KVK. And
Yeah.
you know,
I would I would actually I don't remember you were you guys able to do domains this last KVK or no?
well, that's the next thing I was going to bring
Yeah.
up, right?
Okay, okay.
As far as
Yeah.
like old, like, so the game is kind of changing, right? Like the game has changed very, very recently with Lilith finalizing their domain system.
Yeah.
And so now deadweights can be treated a little bit differently. I did want to mention in the chat that Black Panther, one of the leaders of your kingdom, did clarify that you guys were given the keys to 3092. So that's basically how you guys got the kingdom, was that you sort of like did really good diplomacy to get that kingdom. And
Panther did good diplomacy.
yeah,
Farmer's here. What's up, Farmer?
what's up, Farmer?
Yeah. Looking
Cloud in
alloys.
the
Yeah.
mentioned vacation mode is coming, should
Yeah.
help with the deadweight. I don't know all the details of the new domain system. What I do know is that for kingdoms, it's going to be like a 600 to 650 city limit. And once you have 600 to 650 level 25 cities, you will then be able to pick some of those cities to not be in your number one domain. You can move those cities to the secondary domain. And that is that is an alternate way of dealing with deadweight that has just entered the game. Like that literally just has come into the game very recently. Earlier this year, that domain system had a cap of either 800 or 900 cities. That was a very hard number for many
Yeah.
kingdoms in this game to achieve. Like, we're a pretty big A kingdom. We have deadweight. We have, like I said, we have these sort of legacy cities that have been around for a long time, and we couldn't even reach
Yeah.
the original domain system. Um, anyway, just your thoughts about what I've been saying there, and also just one direct question: like, how big of a challenge do you think it's going to be for you guys to reach the domain system as a newer kingdom?
So about what, a month or 2 months ago, when they announced it, they said it was going to be 500 accounts. So I don't know if that's still what it's going to be, or is it going to be 600 now? Regardless,
Yeah,
it's less than
I
the
think it's
900, right?
600 to 650. I think I saw that in a note recently. Now, I don't know if
Yeah,
that's how many. It might be that when you register for a KVK, you only have to register 500 accounts. But in
yeah.
terms of qualifying for the domain, I'm pretty sure it's 600 to 650.
Okay, so as of when we're going into KVK, which is this pop, people like to game it, whatever. Like we're going to this pop. I'm not going to say which map, but it's going to be this pop.
Well, that's one of
It's
my
still going to be,
questions later, but you don't have to
yeah,
answer it.
yeah. Well, and it's not, and that's like we probably would like more time, but that's literally max skip, so we have to go. Right. The It's still 900, right? I think it's like
Oh,
the
okay,
next
for you
pop
guys
after
right
this.
now.
The next pop after this is going to be dropped down to whatever the number is, like 600 or 500. Uh, which, is it a blessing or a curse? I don't know. I think that's part of the reason why a lot of the kingdoms that we probably didn't want to see this pop are going to skip one more pop. I don't know, right? But the way we're constructed is very interesting. So, for example, I just pulled you guys up on Fleisch. I think you guys were about, actually, let me just have it here right now. You guys were about, so top 300 power isn't what Lilith uses for matchmaking, but because like the 1093 Liquor Studio, Fleisch, a lot of these scans, they use that to calculate Imperium. So I'm going to use this number just because at least like people, it's like a common language, right? When you speak this language, people get an idea of the power and stuff. So you guys, your top 300 power is 18.1 bill with 658 billion KP, right? And like I don't know how many active main accounts you guys have. Um,
It depends on what you define as active. You
Probably
know,
above
I mean,
100 and less
really,
than
like the
150.
new question is
Yeah.
how many active main accounts do we plan on bringing
Bring it
to our
in. Yeah.
domain one? It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
almost
Exactly.
it has suddenly become a different
Yeah.
question than it ever has been before.
Yeah. And it's awesome. Like the people that are hating on the domain system, the biggest drawback of the domain system to me is domain 2s and 3s doing nothing but wrecking KVKs. But
Yeah,
the
that's a
actual
big
like
problem.
domain ones for people that can use them, that's amazing because it solves so many of the problems that people had before. And it gives a lot more control to the kingdom, right? So touching on some of the stuff you talked about with like an older kingdom, you don't need to move to a new kingdom now for a couple reasons. One, they have the domain system; they're actually lowering the number. So once you could go into domain, right, essentially all the deadweights, rogues, whatever, you just don't bring them with you into this KVK. It doesn't affect matchmaking, right? You can actually have matchmaking really reflect your power or your kingdom's fighting strength. It theoretically should lead to like better matchmaking because everyone that's in a bigger kingdom gets to play around with that, and then that's just what you're bringing in. You can't bring in anyone else, right? I think and you could confirm or not, during the KVK where we fought against each other. It turns out like this is what I heard from the 1900 side is they had a bunch of big accounts that they actually put to sleep, right? And then they did the AB matching with 1824 for the Storm stratagems. And then once they actually got matched up, they activated their big accounts. So 1900 was going into KVK at BC, but then they activated all these big accounts. And
I thought
that's what I
everybody did
heard.
that. I thought everybody did that. I mean,
No,
we
we
did
didn't
that
do that.
too. We did that
Okay,
in our
perfect.
last
Yeah.
KVK, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
were some
Okay.
accounts that we
Yeah. So
activated. Yeah.
I think they actually took that away.
Mhm.
Right. So basically, like you can't game that system now. Here's just your roster. You can pick your roster, but you go in. And then the second thing, which isn't implemented yet, which I think would make a huge difference for the game, is they released like at least a preliminary a framework for allowing Imperium kingdoms to bring in migrants. Right. So depending on your KP, all that stuff, it's not just one special ticket a month. You actually get more. And depending on how they adjust that, the incentive to actually drop out of Imperium might not be what it was before, right? So the combination of the domain system and being Imperium and being allowed to bring in a lot more migrants, you actually like those are two like big problems that if you go to a new kingdom, you get instant relief from that you might not have to actually do to get the relief from anymore. right? Now there is still like, the matter of like if you have like a lot of rogues, which like an older kingdom, you should have that stabilized to a degree where at least they're all like isolated out into zone one or something. But like you said, there's a lot of advantages about a older kingdom, right? Like the shells are built out, like the territory is correct. Like something that's been taking up a lot of attention for us the last few weeks is making sure the shells are balanced, right? The territory is supposed to get a certain amount of wood, um, whatever you get from a granary, stone and gold. And like some of the shells we had weren't really balanced, right? So it's building out to the right nose, maybe deleting some flags and making sure like we have the main alliance, we have the primary fighting shells, and then we have a number of secondary shells that you just use to carpet. So a lot of the stuff we're doing is probably for stuff that is required at a higher level of fighting, which honestly, with the level we're probably going to end up fighting at this first KVK, it's not necessarily expected. But that's like a lot of work you have to do in a new kingdom that you don't have to do if you're in an old kingdom like 1770, right? Like some of the things I brought up on Plato's pod, at least briefly, is I never thought about this before. So if we're actively building credit in many shells, right, what's the best way to get rid of a rogue? Ideally, they just quit, right? But these are also players that are just playing, maybe they enjoy farming, whatever, right? And like if you antagonize them, if you zero them, if you talk trash to them, some of them might quit, some of them might get a sense of purpose, right? And like all of a sudden becoming a rogue and like ruining your MGE or just making your life miserable becomes the purpose for them playing the game, right? So ideally, the second thing, if you can't get them to quit, is that you actually supply them with passports to leave, right? But if we're trying to build out shells, and then you also need credits to sell passports, how do you prioritize that?
Doesn't work. I mean,
Right.
number of passports that we can sell from a shell alliance
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
very
yeah.
limited. You got to be a real special player to. We don't really have rogues in 770, but we certainly have like random natives who are like, "Can I get teleport or can I get passports?" And it's like, boy, they underestimate how many resources they're gonna have to give us for us to sell them passports. I'm like kind of the soft sell. Like I take less resources than everybody else, right? I mean, not that I take them, but I'll like come to the officer group and be like, "Hey, this player wants to." They want passports. They're offering us this amount of resources, and literally the other officers will say, "That's just not enough. That's literally not enough," and so they're just sort of stuck. We haven't had too many players. Yeah, I think when you transition to a new kingdom, that's when the rogues happen. I mean, rogues, knock on wood, have not been a big problem for us.
Yeah.
And obviously, Lilith has added some mechanisms to, decrease the impact that rogues can have. You can exile them to one of these zone ones and stuff. It is interesting that you talked about the shell alliances, and I did want to ask you about that. I'll ask you in a moment, how many shells you're working on, how many shells you have in place, just to give people an example of what, the kind of operation Bus is talking about here. Here in 1770, I was just counting it. We have our main alliance, the Handsome Devils. Then we have N70D, which does have access to Zone 3, but it is a farm alliance. So the number of active relevant farm alliances we have would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. At least 10, maybe 11 farm alliances are alliances that, to some extent, are expected to have enough credits to build forts in Lost Kingdom.
How many you guys have again?
10 or 11 farm alliances.
Okay. Yeah.
How many are you going for?
Yeah, so I'll kind of tie back into what we were talking about earlier, right? Because I didn't answer that. So right now, you guys have 18.1 bill, top 300 power, 658 bill KP, according to Fleisch. I did a scan this morning for us. Our top 300 is at 12.2 bill power right now. That is right on the, as far as the top 300 goes, right on the border of A and B seed. If you look in Fleisch, there's a few that are 12.2 on the A side, a few on the 12.2 ounce on the B side, and we have 314 bill KP, so slightly less than half of what you guys have, and we have about 50-ish main accounts. All right.
Yeah, pretty
Now,
good configuration there for sure.
yeah. Now, but our City Hall 25 accounts is crazy because we have a crap ton of farms, like way more farms than normal. We have about 550, I think more than 550 CH25 accounts in this kingdom, and a lot of them are just farms that we brought in, right? Currently, we have a main alliance. Obviously, we should have 6 shells that are either like completely ready to go for this KVK, or at least mostly ready, which I think is way more than what we'll need. Based on our profile, we're more than likely going to get at least 1 campmate, probably 2, maybe even 3, right? Like one of those like four kingdom camps. If we somehow end up in a actually, I don't even see how it's going to happen, right? But we have to end up in a. I think we almost have to end up with a campmate, but we're actually almost on the borderline of being able to do the domain system right now with 50 main accounts, right? Like with a new domain system. We won't be able to do it for this one because I think they're still requiring 900 or 890, whatever that number is. But for the next one, I think for sure we'll actually be able to do domains. And then, yeah, I think 6 shells that you could at least do some stuff with. We're working on. I mean, I could pull this up real quick. Let's see. Hold on real quick. Sorry. 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's kind of gross. We have 16 shells that we're working on to some degree. Some are a lot slower than others, but that's like kind of absurd, but I don't know. I mean, you could use them later or not, but there's a lot of freaking farms in this kingdom right now, like doing a lot of different things. So it's been really, really fulfilling. Also a little overwhelming, but playing with these people because the activity level is like through the roof. And it's been very, very cool working with the team. There's a lot of people in the kingdom that have been just stepping up, volunteering on their own, doing a lot of stuff, stepping into roles that honestly I thought like, maybe a few of us would have to do. And it's like almost like it's somehow the system developed on their own. You start figuring out a hierarchy and people are taking charge of stuff like that. So yeah, that's answering the question you asked before and this question you just asked now.
Yeah.
16. Yeah, I would say 6 shells for this KVK, but there's 16 shells we're working on.
Yeah, and boy, this game is so buggy sometimes. Won't let me see alliance markers or alliance lines anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, like so that kind of segues me into another question I have, and you kind of brought it up in an interesting way because you were talking about, oh, you have so many farms, and one of the things I'll say about our recruiting process and what we look for in recruits is we do ask people, we ask them a number of questions, but one of the questions we do ask them is how many farms do you have? How many City Hall 25 farms do you have? How many farms do you have in total? Because that is part of the value of an account and the value of a player. For those who are or are not familiar with Busdriver's YouTube channel, he does do a lot of coaching on his channel, and a lot of his coaching is centered around the equipment that players have, the commanders that they should build next. And Bus, you can correct me if I'm wrong or modify what I'm saying here, but some of the premise of what Busdriver's coaching is about is like, how can you build an account that will get into like a really good kingdom? And Bus, I was interested to know, like, now that you're building your own kingdom, would your coaching, has your coaching changed at all in terms of what players should be trying to do to make their accounts attractive? And how would you coach players to be a good player in a kingdom that's being built? Because I think that player is maybe a little bit different than the kind of player who is trying to get into 960 or something.
Yeah. So first I got corrected. We have 623 CH25 farms right now.
Okay.
So that was after we have a few more people come in the last few days. So if it was actually the new domain system, we'd be able to register for it now. As far as the coaching, I I I don't know if this is people's takeaway from it, right? One, obviously, it's for entertainment. But what I really like for people to get from it is like understanding that there can be whatever the quote unquote best play is, but it might not be the best play for the person, right? Like personality, people's preferences matter, right? Like I had a guy recently. He did a really, really good job of managing his account, and honestly, his account is probably better than 99.5% of people's account. It's like 12 bill KP, like a 9 something ID, like the like a maybe like a 3-ish year old account, something like that. Right? He had I think 4 or 5 cabs on his account, four or five cabs. Right? I'm like, this is a really well managed account.
Four or
If
five
everyone's like
calves.
marches,
Oh, march it. 4 or 5
right?
cab marches.
Yeah, but like his gear, the equipment, the armaments, how he managed it, like his farms, like everything. Like you could tell he put some thought into it, like whatever. Like it's not like he doesn't know that if you sacrifice maybe like Cav March 4 and 5, and you went like Archer 2 and Infantry 2, you probably get some more output, right? But he just likes Cavs, he likes the movement speed, and he decided to build his account around that, right? And like when I say it's well managed, people are like, oh, like how can you say it's well managed? It's like, well, first of all, that account is probably better than yours. So if that's not well managed, then how would you say what would you say about your own account, right? But two, like it's like this like lack of understanding. Like this is the game, and if you're doing uh uh I assume you're like part Korean, I mean part Asian.
Me?
Yeah, are you,
No,
or
no.
is it
I'm
just
just a
the
white
last name?
guy. Maybe it's
Oh
just
really?
the.
Is it cool, just Asian name? Okay, I just
No,
thought like maybe
Koo's not
the
my real name. Koo's a
okay.
Brian Koo's a famous old school
Okay.
arcade gamer.
Okay. Well, like the stereotype for Asians is like, oh, you have to either be a doctor, a lawyer, or maybe a engineer, where it's not a real job, right? And you could do like whatever the real job is, right? But if it's not really lighting you up, if you're not growing as a person from doing it, there's an upside of how much you grow as a person, but like then maybe that job's not for you, right? And I would say like when I'm mentoring people, like a lot of it's helping them figure out, like also just talking to them, right? A lot of this I don't necessarily say. It's kind of getting a read on the person's personality. What kind of seeding would they like to play at? What type of fights? What kind of like what how will they be able to maximize their enjoyment of this game, right? And some could be finding that imp, some could be finding at a lower seating, right? So everyone's a little bit different, and then within that context, okay, like how do we start optimizing your account so that as you're building your account, because like I think that's like to like this game, you have to like enjoy being patient and then getting essentially the dopamine reward for having a vision or a goal and then building towards that and then finally getting that. And then the coolest part is being able to test it against someone else who's trying to do the same thing with their account on an individual basis, but then a kingdom versus kingdom, or even like camp versus camp, or allies versus allies. Basically, then like that's like what's really enjoyable for most people, right? So it's not just pumping out like a cookie cutter. You do 222, 2M, 2 cav, 2 archer. You have to do this. You have to do this. Even though like maybe you could get some micro optimization out of it, but if you don't enjoy that, like if you don't want to run 2 infantry because you enjoy cav more, like okay, let's do that. And then how do we, in the context of that, optimize for that, right? So I would say that's what the mentoring really is about. And then a lot of it then is not do this, 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 this. It's here's why I would do this, and here's the decision or the thought process that goes into it. Is that the only way to make a choice? No, right? But like if someone makes a choice, I would hope you would be able to verbalize or at least present to somebody what made you like make that decision, right? If it's because Brian Koo told me to do it, well, why did you do it? Because Brian Koo, right there, if you can't think for yourself, when another situation comes up later, how are you going to decide what to do besides like watching a YouTube video of someone else telling you what to do, right? Like, so a lot of what I'm mentoring is I'm trying to plant a seed, helping people start being able to make decision process, making that decision on their own, understanding the thought process that goes behind it, so they can start applying it to something else. I would say where I see that happen the most is actually on armaments, because once you have someone get some momentum and they get over the barrier of, for most people, I notice it's actually making the wrong choice, right? So to not make the wrong choice, kind of like what you talked about being perfect before, they literally just don't make a choice, which actually is the worst choice you can make, right? Because like if you're not sure which one to keep, which one to delete, if you literally just recycle one and keep the other, that would be a better choice than not recycling like that, than to just keeping both, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
now you're hoarding, and then the more options you have to choose from, the more it's going to slow down your decision making process, and then that's what ends up hoarders do. Like, well, I could use this in the future. I could use this in the future. Like, no. You can only run 7 marches at most for a wedge. You're going to keep 9 armaments, right? Because you're going to run 3. You're not going to run more than 3 of one troop type unless you're that guy I'm talking about. So why would you keep more than 9 or more than 12, right? Like maybe you have a high upside one just in case they release inscriptions in the future where you can scribe over what you have now, maybe. But like a lot of people, they just don't make a decision, or they don't understand why they're making the decision. They can't verbalize it. They can't uh, uh, spell it out for themselves. And really, like when I'm mentoring, it's really hoping people start getting that, because when you can think for yourself, you could go a bunch of different places and be successful.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to kingdom building, or after having experience with kingdom building, does that change my mentoring? No. I didn't really learn anything as far as having to build a kingdom. Um, I learned how. I mean, I got to experience it, right? Like, and you've experienced it. When you first start out, it's like you know what's going on, but also you're just trying to hold on for your dear life. Like that's the reality of it. Like it's there's this and this and this going on. Okay, which one do I do first? Well, the worst thing you could do is just to run away, right? If you just try to tackle one problem and you get some momentum with it, even if you made a mistake, now you have momentum, you could adjust and then kind of pivot to the right track, right? But like all of us, like we know what you should be done, right? But also at the same time, it's like I don't know what's going to happen with matchmaking. I don't know if we build out more credit, so now we can sell more passports, right? And we start maybe taking away some of these alliances that the rogues can hang out together in, and interact with each other and get a sense of purposes. And maybe we convince a few to migrate out peacefully, and then the dam breaks, and the rest of them find it kind of boring. They decide, I don't know. That's a hope, right? You kind of have a plan, you go for it, but like the reality is like most of the plans that you come up with are not going to work the way that you envision it going, right? But it's still good to have a plan, and you start there, and then you kind of adjust and pivot as you go. So when it comes to like a player going to a kingdom, uh, sometimes I mention, if you do want to migrate, because I've done migration for longer now than actually just helping build a kingdom. I know, like talking to other people that are doing migration, talking to other people that are applying to multiple kingdoms, what the other kingdoms are telling them, what they're looking for, what I'm personally looking for. Some of the tells that maybe the stats look good, but it's probably not a good fit, right? So I do try to tell them that, and so they kind of have an idea. But it also depends on the competition level they want to play at, right? Like so, for example, and it remains to be seen, but part of what we had to go heavier on for this migration cycle is probably taking players that quote unquote the top imps don't value the same way that we value, right? Like starting to identify, okay, this person, we think this person can contribute like someone that, for example, maybe has like 15 bill KP on a 4-year-old account, but their KP is at 7 bill. Is there a reason for that? Did they stay at a kingdom for like 2 or 3 years? There's some people that are serial kingdom hoppers, right? And if you know that, what is the most likely outcome when they come to your kingdom, right? Something doesn't go well, or maybe they just get bored, they're going to hop away again. Whereas, like, if someone was in a kingdom for 2 years, right, like the stability there is completely different. And they were in a kingdom for 2 years, and it was like a lower seeding, and like they could produce some stats or something where they were always like the top 1, 2, or 3 in their kingdom, or even in their KVK, right? Like they were a top performer in their KVK, but just the stats are suppressed relative to the competition they could fight at. And if their equipment's good enough, their spends there, their activity levels there, their armaments there, then you take a shot. Like if we end up getting into a bigger fight, right, and all these other qualities are there, they're probably going to be able to step up and actually produce a lot more KP at a higher level, right? But like a bigger imp, which doesn't have to be like creative and do an analysis like or like that. They're just literally, there's okay, we won't take anything less than 15 bill KP. They just won't look at it, right? So,
Right.
like a lot of the advice I'm giving to the people when I'm mentoring them too is just like this is what they're looking at. This is also ways where you can at least open the doors where most of the kingdoms that you could potentially be interested in, right? Because if you have an autarch that's showing that you got like 90 million kills in one of the KVKs that you fought in the last like year and a half, right? Even if your KP quote unquote is slightly on the lower side and they see the 90 mil, all of a sudden they would at least be more open to hearing your reason why your overall stats are lower, but your autarch is higher, right? I think Jingzi, I saw him in here earlier. I don't know if he's still here. So Jingzi is a guy that
I think I might have even
uh,
clicked on their city when I was going through
oh
3090
perfect, yeah,
too. I mean, it's
yeah.
just
So
randomly during the video,
yeah,
but
okay, perfect,
if
yeah.
people want to rewind to that exact moment, you can see
Yeah,
Jeezy's
yeah, I saw
stats.
Jinzi earlier. Yeah, so Jinzi's right here, right? So Jinzi, I remember when I interviewed him, right? It's like your overall like KP is like 6 bill, right? Or something like that. I'm just saying off the top of my head. But like in the last 3 KVKs, he got like over 4 bill of that KP. Right. So like what happened, And he's just like, honestly, it was just kind of casual. And then I forgot exactly what happened, whether they had a loss or something, but all of a sudden he got really motivated. And his like performance the last year was completely different than the 2+ years before that, right? And so like once you kind of get that story and then you spend 30 minutes talking to the guy, you kind of see his thought process and building out his equipment and stuff. Okay, like the logic is sound, everything checks out. We'll take a shot with him. And honestly, like since we've been in, he's been one of the highest, like the biggest contributors. Like this is not even fighting, right? Like not even fighting, just like from like helping out with different stuff, being reliable, and like it, his autarch is about like 2 bill KP, I want to say, or something on the highest one, right? But like overall, it's only like 6 bill or something like that. So it's just something where, from our end, it's being creative with your evaluation. Finding people that you feel like are worth a lot more than what a lot of people without going in will value them at. And then two, when I'm mentoring people, it's kind of giving them an idea. Here's what some of the stuff that migration officers will look for. I mean, like obviously that's still just your resume, right? When you're in the kingdom, you still have to prove yourself. But for them to give you a look, right? If you have this or this or this, all of a sudden, at least they'll be willing to give you a look. And if they're doing interviews where they're willing to go a little bit more in depth, this is one that they'll just skip over, right? They'll just actually look at it. So I would say that that's the extent of the mentoring. It's helping people understand like whatever their goal is, the decision making process to work towards that goal, and then also if it's finding a kingdom that fits them, like kind of some of the stuff that people are looking for, so they can fit that, but doing it the right way and not kind of like selling their soul, right? Because we all know how you can like kind of cook the KP numbers in a way where it could look really good. People give you a chance. You're like, well, okay, I could see how this guy got his stats, and it's not what we want in the kingdom. Like there's some of those too, right? So I think a voice interview really really weeds that out too for kingdoms that are doing migration.
Yeah, and Bus, one of the things you're talking about here is that a lot of this is more art than science. Even though this is a very analytical game and a very mechanics-driven game, we're
Yeah.
watching some fighting now, and there's literally numbers
Which
flashing on the
which fighter?
screen nonstop.
Which KVK is this?
This is actually the 2956 Tides of War, actually.
Oh, nice.
I just picked one that had some action, but you know, and this is one of the things that I kind of want to get across on like a big picture level when we talk about kingdom building is that you know every successful kingdom is going to go through a completely different journey in terms of how they reach a successful point. When I look back at how the Handsome Devils managed to survive and thrive for 6 years, I mean, there were so many lucky points along the way. There were so many key players that if you think like, oh, if this person weren't there, would we even be alive? I think one of the things you mentioned on Plato's podcast yesterday was that you have multiple R5s in 3092 now, and I was sort of adding up how many R5s we have in our alliance, and I think, interestingly enough, I'm actually talking with someone who's thinking about migrating to our kingdom, and they just stepped down as king of their current kingdom. I was going to do a voice chat with them last night, but they ended up, announcing to their kingdom and announcing to their officers that they were going to be leaving as king. If that person migrates to 1770, we will probably have 6 or 7 former R5s in our alliance. Yeah. And, I think about somebody like Anna and Dex, who are the former kings of 1252. And we fought against them in a KVK a long, long time ago, a couple of years ago. And they decided to migrate their whole group to our kingdom. Yeah. And their group is like a huge part of our kingdom now, like, 20 plus people who are still active, key core players who have the exact same philosophy that we have about how to play. And it's like, if Anna and Dex had decided to like migrate somewhere differently, or if they decided to like remain leaders of their old kingdom,
yeah, who knows,
like,
right?
How different would this be? And I don't want to get too far into that because maybe that'll be something to talk about in a future series of this podcast. But Bus is really saying like there's no point by point guide that we can tell people out there for how to build a successful kingdom. It's way more daunting than that. And I think that as far as like the players and the talent acquisition that happens, first of all, I think that's an incredibly important part. Talent acquisition and talent retention is like a hugely
huge part.
Yeah, it's a huge part of a successful kingdom. Like, you cannot get things done if you do not have the talent. Like, you can have all the best ideas in the world, but when you're in a war and you need to like defend a pass or take territory on your uptime, if you don't have people who are able to actually just take and hold territory, accomplish things on the map, if you don't have those people who are actually going to step up in those moments and get things done, then it doesn't matter how many shells you built, doesn't matter how many players you recruited, the kingdom's going to really struggle, And
yeah.
So, and along with that, and Bus really alluded to this quite a bit in what he was talking about, the metrics for what a good recruit is, they're constantly changing. And they're changing for a number of reasons. One reason they're changing is because the player pool is always changing. In some cases, player pools are growing. If you're a leader of a Vietnamese kingdom in this game right now, for example, you probably have a selection of a lot of quality recruits, because this game is growing in the Vietnamese community. And so you can be a little bit picky about who you accept and who you turn down. If you're an Imperium leader of an Imperium kingdom, an English-speaking Imperium, or an English, an internationally centered Imperium like 1093, or at this point, maybe we even say that 960 has an international aspect to it, even though the leadership, I think, is still largely Chinese. If you're one of these kingdoms, you can be a little bit picky. But as we move down to like these A kingdom and smaller kingdoms that are international kingdoms, the player pool that we're looking at is not necessarily growing. It's fairly static at this point. And so that's one reason why the sort of migration standards are changing. Another reason, though, is we're getting a different sense of like what a quality recruit is. Bus alluded to those players who have a lot of KP, but maybe the recent autarchs aren't that good. Look, that could be a dangerous type of player to recruit for a number of reasons. One reason is that could be an account that has been transferred from the original owner to somebody else, and this new player
that's most likely what it is. Yeah,
might not be very good.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that's most likely, because to me, a big thing also is just people burn out. They're not as serious about the game as they used to be. They still want to play it, but they just, don't want to play those 8 to 10 hour days during war. But those players might have a lot of KP, right? And so we haven't reached that point yet, but I think there's going to be a moment where we see like an 8 billion power or an 8 billion KP account, and I'll be the old fashioned dude who's like, come on, he has 8 billion KP, we have to accept this person, and the rest
Yeah.
of the recruiting team is going to be like, it doesn't make sense. That's a very old account. They're not giving us their most recent spreadsheets of their KVK contribution.
Yeah.
And we just want to say no, because like for us, we had a recent recruit in our last KVK, Sosa. I don't know if you
Mhm.
remember Sosa from LKC.
Yeah, yeah, I remember him. Yeah,
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 yeah. So we recruited Sosa off of the KVK that we fought against you guys,
yeah,
and he was like 50 million power or something like that.
yeah,
And he came in this KVK with like somewhere between 50 to 60 million power, and the guy literally finished in like the top 20 in KP contribution for our kingdom.
Oh, nice.
And the thing is, that's not just the value that Sosa's bringing
Yeah,
as far as the KP in that KVK, but he's also bringing value in a couple of other ways. He's bringing value in he has low power, so the way that his
mhm,
the matchmaking impact that Sosa has is very small because of his low power. But he also has low KP. He has low KP, and
yeah,
that is also factoring into matchmaking. At this
yeah,
point, with the way that we understand Lilith doing matchmaking, we have to assume that Lilith is factoring in kill points quite a bit
yeah,
into how they do matchmaking. And so a player who has a lot of kill points can be considered a detriment because of the impact they have on matchmaking. And so it's a little bit different. We view these things a little bit differently now, where a young player with low KP, but who's had good recent performances in KVK. Here, I think this is Sosa's Lost Kingdom stats for this most recent KVK that I'm showing now, where he had
yeah,
38 million killed, 51
yeah.
million healed. Obviously, this is a young count who is fighting against literal, um, Osiris League
Oh, well,
winning
champs.
whales. Yeah, like multiple OL
Yeah,
champs. He's
yeah,
going to have a
yeah,
tough time getting a good trade, but I'm fine with someone getting a bad ratio and doing a lot of damage, which is what he did. And so, the metrics are changing for a lot of these players. Bus has talked about doing voice interviews with players. That's something that we're also beginning to integrate now, where we really do want a lot of people on our voice chats during war. We saw kingdoms
yeah,
like 2268 have more people on voice chat than we had, and we said we need to make this change. This is just not efficient enough, where we're doing like super efficient things on voice. We're being less efficient with the players who are reading markers and reading chat. We got to get more people on voice chat. One way to ensure that people are going to be on voice chat during war is to like see that they're
yeah.
willing to get on VC for an
Yeah, they're
interview.
willing to get on VC for an interview. They're probably going to be on voice, right? So,
Yeah.
I that I feel like every kingdom should be doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe like spilling the secret or something, but it's not like we created it, you know.
No, it's not. And
Yeah,
um
the other thing with Sosa, like you talked about, the hardest accounts to evaluate are the ones that are bought. Right, I'll just say it. It's the ones that are bought, and one of the biggest tells if account is bought is because I do hope Lilith updates the autark system, because right now it's May of last year, right? So basically, they implemented it May of last year. So any KVK you played May or later of last year, the best stat you have is what's going to show, right? I do hope now that we're over a year past that, they start making it where you could see like 2024 or 2023, right? Because if an account has like 20 bill KP and then their autark is, let's just say 50 mil or something, right? It just doesn't add up. So either something dramatically shifted in the amount of activity slash spend, or what's probably most likely is that that account was bought. And so as soon as someone buys an account, everything that was done on the account before, uh, it's like it's like devalued by maybe like 60 to 70%, because the equipment and the armaments are still there, but like the way this game works, uh, even if you get really far ahead, right, your activity level and your spend over time, your account is going to slowly drift towards that, right? Because new commanders are going to come out, right? People are going to essentially max out whatever the current iteration of the equipment or the armament is. and Lilith has to update new ways to make money from you, which also means like what was really really good before will have a head start over other people. But if you're not spending at the same level or at the same activity level or both, it's going to start drifting towards whatever your spend/activity level is going to be at. So like the autark has been a great way to weed out people maybe with impressive looking stats that we probably don't think will be able to perform at that level. And I do
But
feel
they could
like
do
I
more.
hope.
They could do more. I just want to interrupt for quickly
Yeah,
to stay on this point
yeah,
for a second. It would be amazing if Lilith could do more, actually, right? Like, because when you think about how big of a change that autark stat is to our
yeah,
understandings of players' performance, that's been a huge benefit. But you think about the fact that like when every kingdom in this game is doing stat calculation at the end of a KVK,
yeah,
we have to like have every player send like a screenshot of their HOH to like a
yeah,
bot to like calculate the deads. And even then you don't know if the deads were taken
yeah,
like when they got zeroed or through actual fighting. But like why not show some more of those stats in game? Like at the end of a KVK, why not show like all the deads that were taken from like every player in the KVK? Maybe you don't have to show their like severely wounded to heals, but like show all their deads. And
yeah,
I think that like, the reason Lilith doesn't do that is because they don't want to like embarrass players or like shine a spotlight on players. But we're in this kingdom building podcast. We're talking about how challenging it is to build a successful kingdom. We'll probably get into at some point the fact that so many kingdoms fall apart. They call this game Rise of Kingdoms, but at this point,
yeah,
you could just as easily call it Fall
yeah,
of Kingdoms. In the new intro video for the Osiris League or for Grand Prix, they even refer to like kingdoms rising and falling.
yeah,
Um, and I think Plato yesterday called the game Rise of Monopolies because there's only a few kingdoms that are controlling a lot of the talent now. It's so challenging to build a successful kingdom that I think Lilith needs to, instead of biasing towards the players, I really think Lilith should be biasing towards leadership in a lot of these decisions. Like make leaders' lives easier. Don't make all this data collection so onerous for leaders. Put all this stuff put this stuff easily in the hands of leaders for all the kingdoms so that they can assess their own players. They can assess recruits. Don't make us do more work. Like all these, decisions that could go either way for Lilith, where like, oh, they're going to like limit the amount of stats they provide because they want to protect players. I just think they should lean the other way. Think they need to lean in the direction of like, let's make leaders' lives easier in every way that we can, because that's the issue in the game. I mean, that is what is happening in this game right now, where kingdoms are falling apart. There's fewer and fewer places to go. Busdriver, he had to start a new kingdom, to build, be part of a successful kingdom. He's having to start a brand new project. He's one of the people willing to take that on. And I just think that Lilith needs to, just think about the challenges that are happening, where even though this is now a kingdom building podcast, what we're really talking about is alliance building, right? We're talking about alliance building because that's all we're really building.
I mean, this is in the future, right? First of all, I do want to say it's not like me. There's literally a team, a group of us, and it's like we're all working together. If anything, there's people that have done way more work than me in the new kingdom. So I don't want to like come in here and be like, oh yeah,
no,
let me start
definitely not.
this stuff. That's not it at all. I do think I do. I mean, it's going to change, right? Because the way I think I talked about this. I don't know if it was with you in private yesterday. We're on Plato's Pod. They're all kind of.
Yep.
I can't remember who I told what, but the way this game is built right now, it's not rewarding the strongest kingdom. It's actually rewarding the kingdom that could get the biggest advantage in matchmaking, which I hate. I hate it, right? Because have the parameters for however you want to build a kingdom, And then you would think if a kingdom could operate within that perimeter to build the best kingdom possible, they should be rewarded, right? But you look at that KVK with 1093, and then they put 1960 and 2489 in the same camp, right? Your 1093 was the strongest kingdom. They literally play by the same rules as everyone else. They were just very organized in the way they did it. And that, coupled with Lilith announcing either during that KVK or right after, hey, we're going to drop the domain system now from 900 or 800 or whatever to 500. You're just telling 1093, like, you know, you don't get rewarded for doing a good job of building a strong community and multi-alliance kingdom that's willing to work together and that's very organized, right? And then they had to downsize a lot because of it. So is that going to be long-term, like the direction of this game? I hope not, because like for me, have the parameters for kingdom building, and if you build a really strong kingdom, you should get rewarded, not punished by getting 2v1 or 3v1 or something because your kingdom is too strong. Like, no, we're all playing by the same rules. Like, here's the perimeters, Imperium, all that stuff. Make it happen, right? So I do hope that's the direction this swings, because right now, that's probably one of my gripes with this whole like kingdom building thing is when we're talking about a lot of the kingdom building stuff, really what we're alluding to is matchmaking, right? We want to be lean relative to our KP, so then when we're matchmaking, we can actually be matched up with other kingdoms that are like less strong. As like, it's all how do you cook matchmaking?
Let me jump in for a second. Yeah. Is that what we're really talking about? Because, you know, something we did talk about yesterday a little bit is the difference between like a mercenary kingdom and a kingdom with culture. And I think it's certainly the case that a mercenary kingdom is trying to gear themselves towards matchmaking because they need to have successful KVKs to keep that mercenary train running, where like they retain their current mercenaries and they bring in more mercenaries after their successful KVK.
Right.
But I mean, are you building a kingdom that's going to be that's going to get great matchmaking? Because, you know, in 770, listen, in our last KVK, for example, right? We went into that KVK knowing that we had a ton of dead weight. We knew that the finalized domain system was going to come soon, and that we would likely qualify for that finalized domain system, where potentially some of our dead weight, some of these players that we've been friends with for many years, those players could just be like, hey, I'm really casual right now. Put me in domain. I want to stay in the kingdom. I want to keep, doing events with you guys. Stay in the Alliance Discord. I want to still do Ark of Osiris with you all from time to time. But just put me in domain 2, and I'll live in Rise of Kingdoms that way. We kept all that dead weight so that we would be able to get to the point where those players had that choice, right? So we literally like went into matchmaking like knowing that we could potentially get like a bad matchmaking outcome, right? We were not lean, and we knowingly did that. Now we happened to luck out where like us being fat led to us actually having like a great campmate, right?
Yeah.
Like we were super fat and not efficient, but we had like a great campmate anyway. Yeah. But that's not, so I was just kind of like, I'm curious to hear what you have to say, because I'm not really, we're not just building everything towards matchmaking. We're building everything towards like playing with people we like and being able to lose sometimes and, still survive. And like, if we go into a KVK fat, then like maybe the expectations are a little bit lower. And so like for me as a leader, like sometimes I get a little burnt out. I don't put as much effort in, or like I'm really busy with my business. And I kind of like the idea that like actually we can lose sometimes and like still survive.
Yeah, so I would say there's two parts of this, right? The part where you're doing matchmaking is if you're talking about, for example, dead weights, right? I talked about earlier, if you have an 80 mil power player, but you don't feel like on the field they can contribute to whatever their power is pitting you against matchmaking wise, they're quote unquote a dead weight, right? If they're pulling more than their weight, then, I don't know, what's the term for that? It's the opposite of a dead weight.
Active fighter.
Yeah.
The most valuable thing in this game, an active fighter.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not necessarily a bad thing that like you have that in mind, right? Because like they have to match it some way. So if you understand the matchmaking, or at least kind of some of the stuff they look at for matchmaking, and you want to play to that, that's being strategic, right? What I'm talking about specifically is um, being a very very strong kingdom right now. Depending on how you're constructed, you're actually more likely to get put in a KBK scenario where you're at a disadvantage. Whereas, like, if you're a little weaker 1v1, but then you construct your roster differently, then you're more likely to have a campmate so that and when you go into KBK between you and your campmate, you're actually in a more advantageous situation,
In some
right? So,
cases, I mean, that's the case in the 1093 KVK, but I mean, right now we're seeing almost every Imperium Kingdom, whether it's 1960, 2489, um, well, maybe just those two, but they both have very easy KVKs, right? They have very easy KVK wins where they get to dictate
yeah, so something
how
has
the
shifted.
KVK turns out, and like even in our KVK, like to some extent, the strongest, not the strongest kingdom, but the strongest two camps, they were able to dictate how the KVK, how the diplomacy went. They were able to
Yeah,
dictate the fact that they had a very easy KVK in their direction. So I personally think that 1093 KVK is an aberration. I think you make a super good point about 1093 being decapitated for no good reason by the matchmaking. I think that's just something that it's unfortunate that it went down. Although maybe it's
yeah,
best for the health of the game because now it's the top level is more balanced. But I think that's the aberration. I think that generally the most powerful kingdoms, the reason all these kingdoms are mercenaries, the reason they're recruiting so hard, getting so big. I mean, kingdoms like 960 and 2489 had huge migrations where they now have like 2.5 billion plus KP. Maybe I'm even underestimating that. I think the reason all those kingdoms do it, and I think the reason the second tier is also recruiting hard, like 1606 recruited hard,
yeah.
2217 recruited hard, is because they want to get to that level of control as well. They want to get to a level where they can dictate their future in matchmaking, or at least in diplomacy after matchmaking.
Yeah, so the if anything, to me, the break from the trend is actually what happened when the 960 KVK and the 2489 KVK, those last two, right? Where it was essentially 1v all or like 2v4, but it's really almost like 1v all. I just
Yeah.
you have a kingdom that's so much stronger than even two other kingdoms combined in the map, and it's just like, well, what the hell is this, right? So up until the 960 got that, what has been happening has just been these kingdoms are beginning no match found, right? I don't know what made Lilith decide to change their approach to this,
Right. Why they
right?
gave them a
Right.
match this time.
So I just say, no, you give them a match, right? Because before it used to be okay. You have to essentially, if you don't go into KVK with this other top imp, and you register for the same map, right? And there's a lot of like the dodge and all that stuff. You're just going to get a no match found. So they changed that recently, right? So before it wasn't that. Well, I was talking about the whole matchmaking thing, though. I think the perfect example for that would be like 1188, right? Obviously, they lost and some warts were exposed, but before them, they were never in danger of hitting imp, but they just won a lot of KVK because uh, I've never seen 1188 without a campmate, and they usually always at least have like a good campmate or two, right? Like what was that one? I think it was against 1365. 1188 had Mimi's Kingdom, 1075,
Yeah.
1175
And
and
1079.
1079.
Yeah.
And it was like 3v1. And like, what was the strongest kingdom? 1365, right? But like, when you get 3v1 like that, like, which one, what would you, as a kingdom leadership, what would you rather do? Would you rather have go through like all the headache of trying to manage two, maybe three alliances and, have different people, different leadership teams, all that people? Or would you rather construct a leaner kingdom that could take advantage of Lilith's matchmaking system at the time? So you'll always have one, maybe two strong campmates, and then you could actually take down those stronger kingdoms, managing less people, right? So that is straight up matchmaking. Because 1v1, well, who's stronger, 1188 or 1365? Of course, it's 1365 at the time, right? But But like the way you go into KVK, it's never 1v1. It's always going to be, okay, well, you're weaker here, so we'll give you stronger allies. And then like essentially the top alliance of each kingdom will be matched up with this kingdom, and maybe they'll have a like you're taking 1175 versus the second alliance of 1365. And I think 1365 maybe had a third alliance at the time, and 1079's main alliance is fighting the third alliance. I mean, it's not 1v1 to one like that, right? But like, where's your incentive to actually manage 3 alliances in your kingdom then? Right. So maybe it's not good for the game to have these big kingdoms, right? But like that was a rule at the time. And they almost like through the way they're doing matchmaking through the domain system came in and be like, you're gonna have to break it up because that's not the way we want KBKs to or kingdoms to be built anymore. Right. So and that's just where it's at currently. I think it's gonna swing the other way again, where kingdoms of culture that kind of built up over time when they come back, right? It just I think it's almost inevitable because if you look at a lot of these kingdoms that we're just talking about, right, they're essentially recycling the same player base over and over between them, right? They'll go for here one KVK, then they'll go to 2049 to 960, 960 to 2377, then back to 2489. Right? Like at some point, that older player base is going to retire. It's just the natural flow of the game. And then like as newer and newer players come, maybe the new way of being kingdom building like goes towards something else. Maybe it goes back towards like you build a kingdom from the ground up and you slowly accumulate over time, right? And then it's like a lot of the same player base, and you actually don't have a huge migration every offseason. Maybe you have some attrition, then you kind of add your way, and eventually you climb to the top of the hill, right? Like that's the model I would prefer to see. If you follow like Michael Jordan's career, right? He was a really good individual player. The Bulls went from sucking to making the playoffs, but always getting bullied by like the Celtics or the Pistons until they finally reached the top, right? Now you contrast that with like LeBron and his super team. I don't know. There's just one that I prefer, that I respect more. And the other one, you could tell I'm not a big LeBron fan. It's just like, come on, dude. You know what I mean? Like, do you want Giannis, who's just staying in Milwaukee, won a championship, and like commit and then like try to recruit other people to join them, or do you want someone that's just always looking for the better situation? Oh, I want to go play in LA. I want the money and I want the star power, and I don't want to like go through the up and downs with a team to get there. I just want to join a super team and win a championship that way.
And let's pause on this. Let's pause on this metaphor a little bit. The little LeBron versus Giannis type of metaphor, right? where Giannis is the person building a culture in Milwaukee of all places and trying to build a championship team there, and LeBron is, in my opinion, the best basketball player of all time, who can go wherever he wants and potentially win a championship. And you're saying you posed a very interesting possibility that at some point the game is going to shift back from one alliance kingdoms filled with like very good recruiters. We can call them mercenary kingdoms, but I think at the core of those kingdoms are leaders who are extremely good at recruiting. And will that ever shift back to? And they certainly have they're the strongest right now, 960 does very good recruiting, 2049 does very good recruiting. I don't know exactly what 2377, I don't know exactly how to characterize them, but these are some of the really strong kingdoms in the game. Will that ever shift back to these long-term, slow build-up kingdoms? I mean, the thing about LeBron is that LeBron is the best player, right? And in this game, especially with the way the game is built right now, if you are the strongest account or the strongest group, if you are the biggest whales with the best equipment, with the most pilots, the most resources, then in the game itself, in the actual moment to moment of this game, you can do whatever you want, right? I mean, look at the way that the KVKs are being built these days. Look at Alliance Invictus. No Bastion skills on rallies. No Bastion skills on garrisons. Extremely small Kingsland, right?
Yeah.
Whales can just swarm everything they want to swarm. And if you own the open field, you can generally just win almost every KVK. Look at the way that the 2377 versus 2429 KVK went, where these two teams just fought each other in the field, back and forth the whole time. There was very
Yeah.
little reinforcing of garrisons. There was very little reinforcing of rallies.
So what you,
And
part of the thing
along with
yeah,
that, and I'll let you respond in a minute. But one thing I want to add is that, you know, these new players, you're talking about old players recycling out and new players coming in. But I think one thing that we have to note is that new players are not that good at picking kingdoms. They just go to the kingdoms they've heard of. And I'll get into this maybe a little bit later after I hear from you. But we've always been a very inefficient game in a way where people don't really pick the right kingdom to go to. They go to kingdoms like, you know, 1307 or 1960, some of these old imperiums that died out.
Yeah.
And they're still doing that. New players are still doing that. They're going to the top kingdoms. It's rise of monopolies. What do you think, Bus?
So, I mean, part of the reason why I brought up 1093 a couple times, do they have high spenders? Yes. As many as 960, no. Right. But they essentially, to combat, because if you have an Imperium system, right, and as it is right now, it's very, very limiting. Once you're Imperium, like you essentially can't recruit, where it's minimal. They combated the very, very high spenders with more numbers, right? Which, okay, fine. If there's X amount of power, you want to do more numbers, or you want to do higher power and less numbers, but like just higher spend, right? There's different ways to go about it. But if you do that, then you also drop the number of accounts you can have in a domain. You're essentially making it where the highest spender with the most power wins, right? So it's killing that ability to maybe try to compensate like that quality with just more like well managed numbers,
Right, and it's
you know.
hard
So
to manage more numbers, right? It's harder
and
to
it's a lot
coordinate
harder.
more
So
people, right?
yeah, so they were able to do it and then have an advantage that way, and then you just took that from them. Like to me, it's like that they didn't disband because the kingdom was poorly managed. They disbanded because Lilith forced it on them, right? Like you could tell, like I'm that's something that that for me like rubbed me the wrong way with
Yeah,
how they went about it.
I
Right?
you know, I actually brought it up with Chisel on
Yeah,
an Osiris League stream.
yeah,
I brought up that I didn't like how 1093 had been sort of put in that position.
yeah,
And I remember Chisel being like he was pretty blasé about it. He was like, that's the that's the price of dominance. That's what he said. It's the price of dominance is that, you know, you get, I guess, get challenged from different directions. And like, I mean, Lilith
yeah,
is like this, but I mean, like Lilith is going in the direction of like dismantling 1093s, right? Like now the domain system
yeah,
is smaller, 650 650 cities. Every now kingdom can choose to only bring 650 cities into a KVK. That is
yeah.
probably also a direct reaction to 1093's dominance. I would be curious
Yeah.
if the Chinese server has the same system as we have. I don't know.
Now, I will say this. This is just floating it out there, right? I'm not saying this is the way to go. This is a very obscure reference. You sound like you follow the NBA to a degree,
Yeah, I mean,
right? So,
yeah, definitely.
so I don't even remember Sam Hinkie, right? He's the guy that's known on the Sixers as like the process, right? Essentially,
He was like the general
he
manager.
yeah, he purposely tanked to get Joel Embiid, all this stuff. He's like, hey, we're gonna suck for 4 years, right? He like openly admitted we're gonna tank,
Yeah,
right? We're not gonna be middle of the road, and he set that team up to be really, really good. The guy that actually took over did a poor job, in my opinion, of managing the resources that were left. They're still a contender. They could have been so much better. But when Hinkie got fired, he wrote like a letter or something, right? It was like 13 pages. Probably 10 people read it. I was one of the 10. When he got fired, one of the lines in his letter that he wrote was, when like 31 people or 31 general managers are looking one way, there is a huge advantage potentially the other way if you could find like the opportunity, right? And it always stuck with me, right? So right now the quote unquote meta is a strong one alliance kingdom. I actually wonder if you can be really smart with how you're managing the power of your players. If you can, even with the current construct of a lower number domain system, have more than one alliances and still get an advantage that way. right? We have to see how they do the migration with Imperium and all that stuff. But like, there's always going to be people that are willing to take a risk or be innovative to try to come up with ways to play the system. Just because everyone
Yeah.
says one alliance is the way to go doesn't mean
This,
that has to be the way to go.
yeah, 650 cities is still like has the
Yeah,
potential to be a lot of active players. A
you can
lot
still
of
have
active
two
players.
alliances. Yeah,
Yeah, you could still have
yeah,
two alliances. You'd have fewer
yeah,
farms. You would have fewer
yeah,
farms. But I mean, if you have 300, like, let's say, this is you've brought this up before, and this is a very interesting
yeah,
idea. You know, let's say you did have two full alliances and you were able to get all those people to sort of buy into the same philosophy and join the same
yeah,
voice chat, like be on the
yeah,
same voice chat, right?
yeah.
That would be pretty darn effective compared to what some of these very top kingdoms do. Like, I mean, listen, a kingdom like 960, they are a very efficient kingdom, no question about it. But at the
Yeah.
same time, a very quiet voice chat, not too many people talking. You know, the leaders, they're super efficient, but like, are they doing a bunch of things at once? Are they in 5 different places? Are they using multiple voice chat channels to like fight in multiple fronts at once? Are they getting all those pilots um to go to from one voice chat to another to fight at different fronts? I mean, in a way, what you're saying is a good point, but in another way, like we're ultimately bashing our head against the wall of human reality, right? Which is like, okay, sure, you can get 300 people together, but like 300 people cannot play 16 hours a day for a week straight, and so then you have to have pilots, and it's harder to get pilots for 300 accounts than it is to get pilots for 100 accounts. And so I mean, yeah, it is an interesting idea, and there is some
Right now, to be able
merit
to,
to it.
if you're a new kingdom, you want to pull that off, right? You still have to have one solid alliance first, where for in the gym business, we call it a churn rate, right? Essentially, what percentage of people you lose every month, right? So if you have a churn rate of like less than 2%, that's really, really good. And then every month you're also gaining people in. That just people move away, they get, whatever reason. So you're gonna have a churn rate when it comes to a kingdom too. Uh, Obviously, when you lose a KVK, your churn rate will be higher. But like for established kingdom like you guys, you could literally probably go through your data and figure out your churn rate on average after every KVK, right? And you can start building off of that. So for me, if you want to go multiple alliances, one, the kingdom churn rate has to be relatively low first. So you're very, very stable. And then you have one alliance where the processes are pretty much like built out. It's already, I don't want to use the word autopilot, but like it's minimum work for leadership to maintain it.
It's
Right. And
sustainable. You
then,
have multiple people
yeah,
who are able to cover. You have a division of labor where like there's
yeah,
not a key figure risk and a high chance of burnout and stuff like that. And
yeah. And you don't just spring up a whole new alliance like for the next KVK, right? It's not like 960, like merging in like 60MX or something. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying maybe you're starting to willing to go over one alliance. Maybe you have like 20, right? But then like how do you integrate that where like everyone wants to be in the main alliance, right? How do you figure out the logistics of that? And then you kind of build up. I don't know. I'm just spitballing, right? It could be a very, very dumb way to go because you could do that and then they could just put two like good kingdoms against your one and you just get wrecked anyway. Like why the hell why did I go through trouble doing this? But maybe there's an opportunity for that because in this game, to me, in open fielding, like what do we even look at? Like when we're balling up, oh, my ball is bigger than theirs, right? And how do you determine how big a ball is? It's how many marches are in there. If you have more players, you're just going to be able to have more marches. And if you can have more marches and the quality is high enough, the number is going to win, right? You could be fighting 960, but if you have 2-1 their numbers, even though their quality is number, or maybe it's not 2-1, right? Because it's not going to be like 14-7 marches, but maybe like your players on average have like 4 marches, 5 marches, and their players on average have 7, and they have 150 and you have 300 players. You're going to win in the open field just off of sheer numbers. But it's also way harder to get there, right? Kind of I talked about. Once you have one alliance, you're trying to go into another one, all that stuff. There's just a lot of ways you could actually go with this. I do want to like encourage people. I don't know the people that are still watching. Like you don't have to have a cookie cutter model where you just follow one model. You have to be one alliance. The game's one alliance. Like when everyone's looking one way, there's usually an opportunity somewhere else, right? It's the same way with investing. When everyone thinks something's a good idea, the peak is already in, right?
Yeah.
Like it's going to pop at some time. And when everyone thinks it's a bad idea, it could go lower, but the bottom is always when everyone thinks it's a bad idea. No, if most people think, hey, the bottom is in, it's time to invest, it's going to go lower. That's not the bottom, right? So this is just something to think about, putting it out there in the future. And what's cool with the younger players you talk about, yeah, they might know how to pick, might not know how to pick kingdoms, but like they also aren't so stuck in this model of bouncing between mercenary kingdoms. Oh, this is how it has to be, right? They could have some dumb ideas. They could also have some like creative ideas. Like there's, as long as there's new players joining this game, there's always going to be innovative people that want to try something different and then throw it against the wall and see if it works. So I don't know. But I don't think it has to be one alliance, even with 600 spots for domain or 500 spots. It makes it tighter. It's given an advantage to higher spender, right? Like just a higher spender with lower number kingdoms. But that number is still high enough, the domain, where I feel like maybe you could do 1.5 alliances or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, listen. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, you could have, or actually, Kildy in the chat is saying Kildy's given a couple of good, made a couple of good statements here in the chat. Kildy's now in 2377, your former teammate. He said
Yeah.
that with their 172 players in 2377, they could do 2 alliances.
Yeah.
And Kildy also said earlier, big KVK next pop is likely. At least I hope. I don't know if that's new news, but 2377 is thinking about a big KVK next pop. So
Yeah, I'll say the rumor I heard. The rumor I heard is that 2377 is going to try to match up with 1365 in the next
okay,
pop. So,
okay,
we'll see.
yeah. I wanted to go. This may be a good way to maybe wrap up and potentially segue into the next podcast in the series. We're planning to do another live stream on Busdriver's channel next time. You made a very interesting quote from Sam Hinkie that, what was the quote, that if 31 NBA teams go one way, you should go the other way?
When 31 GMs are looking at one way, there might be a big opportunity like the other way.
In the
So
other,
like
yeah.
yeah, so for example, like what he was talking about was everyone was trying to just like making the playoffs successful
Over and over
right?
again. Yeah. And
Yeah, whereas like that's actually the worst place to be. You're either one of the top teams or you actually want to be the bottom because it allows you to create a bunch of cap space, allows you to get top draft picks. You could actually, and then when you hit on those top draft picks, that's when it could be like transformative for your franchise. But if you're always like an 8 seed, like right around hovering like the playoffs, and then like your players aren't good enough to get you over the top, but like you can only bring in some mediocre like medium players, right? Like your upside isn't there, right? So like what he's talking about is an opportunity to go for the moon,
Yeah.
or like say at the bottom. Which to me, I think like talking to me, like we talked offline a little bit yesterday. If I want this kingdom to have a shot to be the best kingdom in the game, right? Like that's a lot of the stuff I'm thinking about. We're nowhere close, right? And like more likely than not, that's not going to happen, right? Just got to be realistic. But also, you could be like a dreamer and like talk about it and try to lay the groundwork and plant the seeds for that to happen in the future.
Yeah. When I heard that quote, what I thought about was, and maybe in the second part of this podcast, we'll talk a bit more about the journey that 770's been on. But way back in the day, years ago, Addy Navo's always been the leader of our alliance, and he and I would talk about the game in a certain way. And I brought a lot of experiences from being a professional poker player to this game where I was just you play poker for a long time and you live in that world, you become like a very objective person, a logical person, an
Yeah,
analytical person, and like a not results oriented type of person.
yeah,
And I'd like to think that I passed some of that thinking on to Addy in the early days where we just started thinking about this game differently, where it was like, okay, we have to look more at our process rather than whether we win or lose. And I remember
I
this
agree.
was
Yeah,
years ago, Addy, we were talking about something, we were on voice chat, and he was like, Brian, I'm in all these in-game whale chats, and they don't talk about any of the stuff that we talk about. They spend all their time in those chats discussing whether they should wear a 6-piece, cavalry set, or if they should use Ash of the Dawn instead. They spend all their time trying to theory craft how to get 2% more all damage on their marches, and they
Yeah.
don't talk about coaching their players at all. They don't do any of the stuff that we're doing. And I think back to that time, and I think back to the kingdoms that were around then, and this is the international English speaking community that we're talking about. And I just wonder if there were a bunch of those kingdoms, all those big imperiums that used to exist that no longer exist, were they just interested in the incremental kind of success that the 31 NBA GMs are interested in when they just try to like make the 8th seed in the playoffs, rather than applying first principles and being like, what are we really trying to accomplish here? What's the best way to get to that goal? And
Yeah.
and that's why I sort of said earlier, like, why I wonder if the Chinese server has the same domain situation that we have. I wonder if the Chinese server has a bunch of one alliance kingdoms like we have. I've heard that they don't. I don't know about the domain system, but I've heard that the kingdoms on the Chinese server are bigger. And this sort of gets to your concept of like, are we inevitably just going in this one direction forever, or is there a chance to pull back? I mean, it's such an open question, but part of what has happened is like a cultural thing. In esports, NA esports, North American esports is always been kind of like a running joke at how bad NA is at most esports games. And if these big imperiums back in the day were just like not building up their native player base, if they were worried about their own KP rather than doing what they need to do as a leader. I mean, somebody like Adinabo at this point in the game, he doesn't even, when he's in war sometimes, he doesn't even have a march out on the field. He's just looking around the map, figuring out different things that we can do, coordinating with other camps, coordinating with our own camp. It's not about his individual glory at all. And I just wonder, and listen, we we're not the most successful kingdom in the game, but we're still alive when a lot of those big time whales who were talking about how to theory craft an extra 2% damage, they're not playing anymore. I do wonder. Go ahead.
I'll plug your kingdom for you, right? Because we're competing for the same players, like you said. So we were in the same KVK, 2 KVKs in a row. While we fought against each other 2 KVKs ago, you guys won, and then we were allies, and we lost. And I talked about this off stream. This last KVK was hard, not because we lost. It was the first. I felt like we didn't really compete, and there's. I don't know the exact reason, right? But it was tough because I felt like we let our allies down. Now, having said that, your kingdom is like a kingdom I respect. Okay, and
thank you.
2 KVKs ago, I didn't like your kingdom, but I still respected you guys. Right now, we're not going to name kingdoms that we don't respect. But we're getting some kingdoms.
I'm glad we haven't gone that way. When I was picturing this conversation, I thought I might end up there. So I'm glad you've taken me a different direction.
Yeah, right. But like, we got thinking kingdoms we don't respect, and like it's like it's we'll narrow it down to maybe like the same like 5-ish reasons why we don't respect that kingdom, right? And it's not because they're fighting ability, all that stuff. It's just there's a way like you go about things, and there's a way like, for example, fighting against you guys, right? You guys did a lot of annoying stuff. That was probably the best way for you guys to go about it, to wear us out and do whatever you need to do, right? And we didn't like it, but you definitely respect it. Because, like, if you think about it, if we were you guys, we would have done the same thing, right? Like just ramming your head into the wall, like over and over again, like into a ball that like you probably shouldn't be fighting, is not playing winning KVK. So like you guys are very strategic, very smart. And then probably the reason why I respect you guys most is you're tenacious, and like you like you'll take on challenges and then try to figure it out. Sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose, right? But like watching you guys in this last KVK and then fighting against you guys in the KVK before, right? I've had 2 KVK of firsthand experience seeing it now, where that's like a kingdom you guys are a kingdom set, right? There's like a culture to it. Like Ananavo is very strategic with like a territory and stuff. He's also very, very tenacious, right?
Oh
So
yeah,
like
he's crazy in war.
most kingdoms, like at a certain point, they would just fold, right? Like you guys could have easily just gave up the first night in Kingsland when we fought. Like we pushed you guys out of the pass, right? A lot of
I
people are
did
like,
give
oh,
up.
so
I gave up. I went to bed.
okay, okay, okay,
I thought we had lost. I was bummed out, and I slept
yeah,
for like 8 hours and
yeah.
just
And then
thought we
like
had
you came
lost.
back,
I
and
woke
then
up
all of
and
a
the
sudden it's
situation was
like,
different, and then I got to work. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, right. So so if everyone gave up though, it would have been over, right? And that's like the tenacity of the kingdom, and it's okay, like like
and well, we also have
yeah,
Koreans, right?
yeah,
Our kingdom is international plus Korean, right? And
yeah,
so our Koreans were very big in that. And so
yeah,
like again, it's like there's a lot that goes into building a successful kingdom. If
yeah,
we didn't have two leadership structures, the division of labor between international and Korean, we might not have made it for that reason too. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
yeah. No, no, it's fine. But like a kingdom, like your kingdom, uh, as long as maybe you guys will play a lot longer. But if you give up, I mean, not if you give up, if you retired, right, and then you have someone kind of carry on the spirit of like what your kingdom's about, it's going to be very, very attractive, right? Because you could either join like a cookie cutter mercenary kingdom, right? And it's like it almost sounds insulting, but like to me, that's just what it is now. Or you could join like a kingdom like that. At some point, I think it will swing the other way, where maybe you guys get like this migrant or this migrant, and now like you have like the culture, the tenacity, and then you have some spending power on top of it, right? You get some momentum, like it could easily like move on up, right? And then at a certain point, a kingdom like yours, right, because of the way you grow like that, if you lose a KVK, maybe you'll have some churn rate, but then maybe some of those people will buy into the culture, right? You've been in 1770, or you've been with the Handsome Devils for forever, right? There's like some stability there where maybe that becomes a new top kingdom. Whereas on Plato's pod, I talked about 2934.
Yeah, yeah.
Before that KVK started, they were on top of the world. I don't think they had lost before. They absorbed a lot of the top fighters from 2975 before that, right? And they were crazy, right? On paper, on the stats, it looked crazy. One guy, the king, disappeared during Kingsland or KVK, during the middle of the KVK, right? And the kingdom just like collapsed on itself, right? And last I heard, like a bunch of their top fighters are like leaving and like going to again a lot of these like mercenary kingdoms again, right? Like, but like it was unfathomable that they were one going to lose, but two just fall apart just like that before the KVK started. And it was it really really struck me like seeing that, because like on the outside they looked like they had all the momentum and all the stability in the world. And you're telling me one guy who, the official narrative is that he got busy on a business trip, so he just couldn't log in, which, whatever. Right. But like one guy went on a business trip and the KVK got busy and then the kingdom just falls apart from that. Like how stable was it to begin with? Right. So like you take something like that and then like a kingdom like yours, right, where honestly talking to a lot of the people in migration, they want a good community and they want stability, and they want like a kind of a purpose to be part of something. And I really do think that or hope and then think the game will start swinging towards that way, where a kingdom like yours would be more and more appealing as you kind of survive through this wave, right? Because a lot of these kingdoms that get all this hype, it's like what kingdom is safe? Really, like what
Yeah,
kingdom is safe right
yeah.
now, right?
I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting though. Like you're saying that they had
Yeah,
a main leader who got busy.
yeah,
I mean, that's not unprecedented at all. And if somebody like Adinava were to retire from this game,
yeah,
that would really affect us a lot. I don't know where 770 would go from there. And so, we are a more stable kingdom than most, like for
yeah,
sure. We've been successful for a number of years. We have players who have been here for a very long time and have no intention of leaving. But we live on a knife's edge as well. We live on a knife's edge
yeah,
in two ways. We live on a knife's edge of, are our key players gonna retire? I mean, I got kind of burnt out in this last KVK. Um,
yeah.
and I'm kind of on my own knife's edge, but we're also on the knife's edge in a positive way, where it's like, you're right. If we ever got that big migration wave of really good players in, I think we're the kind of kingdom that could actually compete at a higher level. And
Yeah, because
I think as
strategy wise, there's not kingdoms that are going to do that much better than you.
right, and like we're
Right? So
able
you
to
have a
execute on
bigger,
a
yeah,
certain kind of strategy that actually works very well.
yeah,
Um, and you know, and I think that for Busdriver, Bus, your situation is really, I guess, in some ways, you have more pressure on you in this next KVK, where like you guys have to prove that you have that structure in place to, when the opportunity is there, when you have the quality players there, are you able to succeed in a war? And just I think we should probably think about wrapping this up soon.
yeah.
There's so much more we could talk about, but I don't want you to give anything away. But I want to give people a little bit of hope for like their own kingdom building pursuits, and then I'll end it with a question to you. In my opinion, there's always an opportunity out there for like a good leadership group to have a ton of success in this game. And one of the ways you can do that is by starting slowly and entering a KVK like Heroic Anthem, where the competition level is not that high, or entering a KVK like Shifting Gears, where there's a bunch of new mechanics, and if you as a group or as a kingdom put in the effort to really learn those mechanics well, strategize how to use them best, prepare your players to, set up their marches to use those mechanics well. I mean, I think back to the Shifting Gears exhibition match that we did. I think like you and like Big Kane got on a stream one night and you guys were like theory crafting the best marches to use for shifters, and then you shared it with all of us, and we set up and we
field marches are the best.
Yeah, and we had like a very good open field on one of the sides. And like so like there are opportunities out there for smaller kingdoms, younger kingdoms, kingdoms that don't have the rep yet, kingdoms that even to themselves have not proven themselves. You can put in the work, you can find a very manageable, winnable situation, and you just build on it. You just go from one, you build on the Heroic Anthem win or the Shifting Gears win. You retain your current players. You say, hey, we won our last KVK to recruits. Why don't you come and join us? And there is a path to building a successful kingdom that way. With that being said, Busdriver, what KVK format are you guys going to queue for in the next pop?
It will either be Heroic Anthem, Storm of Stratagems, or Alliance of Victus.
Okay. You know those are going to be in the next queue.
Well, that ends in 3 hours. That's the three available for.
Oh, the queue.
Yeah.
The queue. You have to select in the next 3 hours. Okay, gotcha.
It ends in 3 hours. Yeah.
So Alliance of Victus, Sword of Stratagems, and Heroic Anthem. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, if I'm not going to make you answer, but if I were in Bus's situation, what would I pick? Listen, I mean, Sword of Stratagems definitely has a lot of skill to it because you have to like figure out the roles for each player. People can't constantly switch stratagems.
Yeah.
At the same time, I mean, if you guys were to enter Heroic Anthem, you'd be one of the stronger alliances in that queue. And to some degree, you could probably control your own fate. And so therefore, like you can, as a group, you can be like, hey, let's just work really hard in this KVK. If we work really hard, we sort of like can guarantee some degree of success. Like maybe if our allies are crap, we might not win, but we'll at least like win zones and demonstrate our ability to take and hold territory.
Yeah.
I'll give a kind of be between those two.
I'll give a hint. How about this? Okay, so last we checked, like I think like about 130 kingdoms were registered for Heroic Anthem, and then like 50 something for Storm of Stratagems, and then like 19 for Alliance of Victus. I mean, it could be like different now. That was just kind of the ratio.
How many for Sword of Stratagems?
It was like like 50 something.
Oh, 50,
and then like 130 something. Yeah, so
HA.
Heroic Anthem has the most, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, we've been approached by some kingdoms to essentially be the B seed to a stronger A seed for Storm of Stratagems, right? That's one route you could go. With Heroic Anthem, like you talked about, the competition, you probably won't get, even though the recent like 960 and 2489 KVK scenario kind of is scary, right? Because like for a kingdom like us, the worst thing you could do is like you get into a KVK and then you see like 1960 versus all, and we're one of the all. It's like, well, what the hell,
Yeah.
right?
Then you just have no
So
idea who you are. Like you can go through the whole KVK and
yeah,
have no idea who you actually are.
yeah. Then like based on the profile, kind of I talked to you about earlier, we're either, I mean, there's three scenarios I think that are three most likely, right? Maybe there's like a one-off one. One where we're one of the stronger kingdoms in the map, which actually that would be, I wouldn't mind that for this one. I like fighting at a higher level, but for like what this kingdom needs, like if we're one of the stronger kingdoms on the map, that wouldn't be bad, right? The second one is we're essentially a strong ally, right? I do think we would be, if someone is looking for a campmate that's a stronger kingdom, if they got matched up with us as a campmate, they would be very happy. Just because, you know, I think there's a lot of kingdoms that have our profile that will be a lot weaker than us. So that also will be preferable. And then really the one we just don't want is the one versus all scenario with like a kingdom that really has no business being on the map with all the other kingdoms it's on the map with. As long as we don't get that, I think we'll be happy. And then you mentioned this earlier. There's being like results driven or process driven. It is imperative if you want long-term sustainable success to be process driven, right? So like a great example of that, you know, you talked about like playing poker. There's just percentages, right? There's always going to be, hey, if you make a right read on the person, what they're going to do, and you make statistically the best play, right? And when you're doing the best play, you're calculating pot odds. Okay, here is kind of what I think they have, what I have. Here's the odds of me or them winning, but here's how much money is in the middle, and is a risk reward worth it, right? So you have a very, very sound process, and then you can make the right call consistently over time. Maybe short term, you'll take an L, right? Maybe you get matched in a KVK that you shouldn't have been matched in. But like if you have the right process, long term, you're going to win. So like, I think it's important for us, even like, you know, we're doing a town hall, I think on Saturday, and like, and you know, I say it too, like, hey, it would be really awesome to get a win, right? Like, and it is important to get a win, but what's more important is to actually show like a good process. In 68, when I was doing migration, right, there's a couple of reasons why people want to come to 68. The most common one is actually a lot of people, they watched the KVK when 2268 was when the 960 KVK, it was an 8M KVK, and 68 was essentially on the bottom left. I think they were right next to 1034, which is really good, supposed to be really good at the time, right? And contrasting the two, 1034 fought for like 4 hours and just went to bed and never came back. 68 had no business fighting 960, but they actually were very tenacious. They almost kind of play that 1770 role where, you know, like how they're building the flag, back flagging, like just very tenacious, annoying the crap out of 960. And they held out for like maybe like another like 2 days or something where they shouldn't have, right? So it was a loss. They had no chance of winning once 1034 went to bed. But like me personally watching that, I'm like, you know what? I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that. And doing my, and even like 6 months later, 7 months later, talking to people that are interested in 68, that was actually one of the main reasons why people brought up they wanted to come here. It was actually from watching 68 play during a loss, right? So like, is it important that we win? Yeah, of course, I would love to win, right? But it's more like, did you actually show a good process, right? So when it comes to Diplo, right? Like I think we could talk about what it's like to feel like the Diplo was not done in a respectable way. We're not going to get into that anymore.
No.
Or you know, like, did they at least attempt to make a fair or competitive match during Diplo? And then, like, did you fight? Were you tenacious? What was it? Did it make sense why you were doing what you're doing? Right? Like, if we have 50 accounts, we're probably going to have a big downtime. Right. So like a lot of it's okay within reason. Okay, they have 50 main accounts, but like did they maximize what they could do? Like were they like if people see that, you know, it could be a loss and they could still be like drawn in. Hopefully it's not a loss, right? Like I'm very sick of losing. But I think the process, like you talked about, and show like it is way more important than the results. And right now, if you ask a lot of people in this game, they probably worry about the results more than the process. And I think when I talk about mercenary kingdoms, I am alluding to that like a lot of them are kind of like taking, I don't know if shortcut's the right word, but they're almost like bypassing the process to a degree to set themselves up to get results. And as soon as the results end, the kingdom falls apart. And we've seen enough cases of that. I don't want to start like just naming kingdoms over and over
Well, it's
again.
happened for
Yeah,
years. It's happened for years. So
yeah, right. Like you know, like that on the surface seems like a very like good model until it doesn't, because the death rate of kingdoms that take on that model is also very, very high. So, you know, we'll see what happens.
yeah, I think ultimately, the way I think about it, especially when things get stressful before a war starts, is that players are smart. Players are able to pay attention to what the group is doing. They're able to pay attention to the vibes of the group, the success of the group, not from a results perspective, but just from a process perspective. People are able to see the personalities of the leaders, who the leaders are as people, for better or worse. And people are smart. They might not say anything, but they're smart. And if they see a good situation, they're going to stay in that situation. If they see a
Yeah.
bad situation, they're going to get out of it. And maybe some people are a little bit results oriented, but for the most part, I think it's best to treat players as though they are smart. And if you work hard and show some talent, then they're going to stick around.
Yeah.
That's
And I
that's
will say
that's one
this.
way to view it, but
I'm
there's you can also recruit your way to victory too. So
like I'm rooting for you guys to actually grow to be one of the top kingdoms. I think like, I think it would be nice to see a kingdom like that that's been around forever. Maybe get some more players that fit your culture, and then see how you guys do competing against some of these other kingdoms. Right. I
yeah,
think like if more kingdoms like that are at the top, the game at the highest level fighting, I think long term will be more fun too, and there will be more like dynamic matchups and like, yeah. So I am rooting for you guys, unless you guys play us.
yeah. You never know. You
Yeah,
never know how things will
yeah,
work
yeah,
out. Bus and I were enemies on the field
yeah.
originally. Then we were allies. Now we're collaborating on a podcast. I said long ago after our first KBK that I was rooting for 2268 to survive as well and thrive, because I felt like you guys were one of the really big English speaking kingdoms. We need more really big, successful English speaking kingdoms. Um, and so I hope everybody enjoys following the journey of my kingdom, of Busdriver's kingdom. I hope you all enjoyed this content. If you do, be sure to throw a like on this stream. Be sure to subscribe to Busdriver's channel. I threw it in the chat. It's also down in the description. I'm sure that if many of you go and subscribe to Bus's channel and he sees a bunch of new subscribers, that will motivate him to want to do a second part of this series on his channel. I think we have plenty more to talk about on this subject. And yeah, Bus, any
Yeah,
last words?
yeah. I think like a really good, it might not be like a good second part would be maybe after fighting is over for us for this KVK, right? A little
Okay.
bit more lag time, but you could kind of see like another progression for like a month or something, right? And like, okay, here's what it was. Here's what this asshole was talking about October 1st, and then like, how did it actually play out a month and a half from now, right? Or maybe that could be a third part. I don't know, but
Yeah, we can figure it
yeah,
out, but that would be
yeah,
fine.
we
I,
figured
I
it out.
think
Yeah, yeah,
the numbers looked real good to me, so I'm
yeah,
glad people enjoyed the content,
yeah,
and hopefully we'll do a lot more of it.
yeah, man.
Yeah, Bus, thanks a lot for being on the channel, and
Yeah, no problem.
good luck with your matchmaking.
Thanks, dude.
Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you all on the flip side.